Hi, my name is Mauricio Moreno. I made a disguise that came out of nowhere. The reason why I made this video is to share my experience on making the disguise and to answer any questions that a lot of you have asked me on how it works, how I made it, when was it purchased, or was it made at a store, or how did I build it from scratch. I never really think about creating a costume for Halloween, when generally all the costumes that I've done in the past have come from nowhere. What I do is to make with the resources that I have, to see what I can build, and most of the times it comes out pretty well. The truth is, I never thought that this disguise would cause so much impact. I did it with no purpose and I just wanted to do it. What is the history of this disguise? Last October, at the beginning of the month, I was in Madrid, Spain. I was doing some work for the Olympic Channel, so one evening I went down to the supermarket to buy some beers to take to my hotel room. Then I got to the cashier and I saw the mask for the first time. What I found to be curious about the mask were its eyes, how they moved around. I found it to be funny, so I decided to buy it in order to have fun with some of the people who worked alongside with me. Once I arrived back to Colombia, I decided to put on my mask with my helmet and see how it worked. I wanted to see what it looked like rather than this to create a costume. I just wanted to take some pictures, post them on my social media sites, but when I saw one of the pictures with the shirt of the bike, the mask and the helmet, an idea came to my mind of making the costume. I started by watching videos of Ghost Rider or Hell Rider characters. When I thought about the costume, obviously the idea of the mask worked perfectly, but the eyes had to be removed since the eyes on the mask gave a funny look to the mask. So the question was, how do I make the flames? So I had seen many references on the internet of the mask on the web. Really what they did was to put fake yellow hair and other simple effects. But what I wanted was to be more impactful. I wanted to generate a certain impact to be able to create the flames. I have not seen references to other costumes, but just started thinking, how can I make flames? How can I make the illusions of fire in my head? When I came up with the idea of using it, obviously I wanted to use it while riding my motorcycle. So I had to think about how to do it in such a way that it was functional for the bike, considering the helmet and the rules and safety. With some LED strips, I cut several pieces of the LED tape and adhered the rows of red and white LEDs to the helmet. Then, what I did was to join them in a sequence of the LED tape and connected them together. The most complicated part was not the electrical part, but how was I going to make it look like a real fire. The helmet has almost 3.5 meters of LEDs cut into segments that are placed around the helmet. When I was finished, what I did was to connect with an adapter to a 12-volt battery, but only half of the lights turned on. I thought that the adapters were not delivering enough power to the entire helmet, so for that reason it was not going to work while building it. We assumed that when we connected the battery, it should have all powered up every single LED array. That was the other issue, how to power up the entire helmet. These LED lights can be used in different ways. There are small 12-volt batteries that illuminate to give power to the LED tape. But the tape is very long, the battery will not work. It only works for short stretches. Then there's the square 9-volt battery, which gives a lot more power to the light pieces, but we had 3 meters of LED lights that needed energy. How to make this helmet light up, but taking into account that it needed to be practical. The first idea was to power from the motorcycle's battery and connect it to the costume, but that kept me on the bike. So what I did was to get a battery like this one, a 12-volt, 7-amp battery, which is not a small battery, but not a very large battery either. And what I did was to adapt the battery to this fanny pack, which is secured by my belt. What was the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge was creating the fire. I had several ideas. The first was to get something transparent, translucent, a type of fabric which can make the flames stick to the helmet, that were rigid and stick them one by one to the ends of the helmet. but that was not going to work because they are not going to be upright. My mother was one of the ones who gave me an idea of using a plastic that I used in women's bras, which gives the shape of the cup that is flexible but at the same time quite rigid. And with this, I was able to create the three sides to be able to give the shape of the flames. One side is this one here, the second one, this side, and the third one in the back. To reinforce the frame, what I did was to take wire and wrap it in each one of the columns of the frame, which gave it more rigidity. Also, the best friend that one must have to do this kind of thing is a hot glue gun. Just put silicone dots in the frame and reinforce it with duct tape. Once the structure was rigid, what I needed was to do the fire. Here's where I saw that this is going to get very complicated. I used surgical fabric, in which I had sourced early on, which is one of the options we got. It is translucent, it is rigid. The idea was to cut pieces of fire that were drawn into the fabric and stick them one by one as layers. So this was not going to work. So what I did first is this paper was to cover the entire structure. Once the whole structure was covered up with the shape of the flame, it was much easier to stick the different flames on the helmet. In theory, what I did was a lamp, or in other words, I am hanging a lamp on my head. The next step was to cut pieces of flame and stick them one by one over the structure so that it looks like it was real fire. It did not stick completely, it stuck in certain spots in order to have flexibility and to move naturally with the wind, which gives the illusion that the helmet's flames have movement. It occurred to me that it would be great on the mask if I took his eyes off and put a pair of red LEDs inside of it so that the eyes would be more striking. I opened the eye gaps a little wider so the visibility range was much larger. When thinking about the helmet, as I said before, believe me, I am the motorcycle rider and it is my safety that is at risk with a disguise like this. If I see I do not have good visibility, I will not risk it and possibly suffer any accident. The mask on the back has the shape of a human face, so when it is placed in the face, practically the holes are very close to the eyes. To show you better how the peripheral visibility range is, I have this GoPro. Practically the lens is the size of a human iris. I will show you that you can also see the peripheral range completely. So for safety issues, I was not going to be placing myself at any risk. Well, there are some envious people out there who will do anything to put you down, or just because they cannot do it themselves, or just because they want to question you on certain things. Once the flames were mounted, I had to make electrical connections. The connection was going straight from the mask to the helmet. Then at this point, the mask was energized. The jacket was the easiest part of the costume. What I did was to put a cable. Initially I had a single terminal, and this is one that connects to the helmet. This terminal I added later, and I will explain why. At the bottom of the terminal I have connected to the battery. I added a switch so I did not have to disconnect and reconnect all the time. At the beginning I drew up a wiring diagram to see what the wiring mapping would be like. And as I said before, the helmet did not completely turn on, and it did not power up all the adapter LEDs. The problem was because one of the terminals was not properly soldered. As it was, the helmet was already covered with flames, but not only half the helmet was lit. But luckily I remembered very well every single solder connection where they were located. I touched one of them, which turned on and enabled me to light up the helmet. Fortunately, what I did was to cut a little here to solder the terminal that was there and put it back together with one more flame on top. One of the two choices either I had was to disassemble the whole helmet or leave it only with half of the lights working. I was able to resolve the issue and the helmet lit up. I took all the precautions, everything that I had to do with the transit rules. I took some initial photos, I tested the disguise, and it worked perfectly. The other idea was the fire coming out of the neck. how could I make that fire? If I have one thing is that when I get something in my head, I must do it. I did not want to use more tapes. I wanted to use something much more versatile that was much easier to handle. So I went to my LED supplier in downtown and found that they had LED lights that were very versatile. In other words, they can be rolled up and practically make into a ball. The idea was to wrap them in my neck, but as they were strips, obviously, as I stated before, safety was first. I was not going to wind up with a roll of LED strips on my neck so as not to risk to get tangled. What I did was to create a necklace with them instead. I used the same plastic structure and materials used into making bras. What I did was a square structure where I wrapped the small LED lids and I added a clip. Now the issue with the neck lights was that they needed to be connected to 110 volt power. But if you cut and remove all the electronic parts, you can use them directly with a 12 volt source. Since they are rated for 6 volts, I put a resistor in one of the ends of the lines that reduces the input voltage from 12 volts to 6 volts. Remember that I had mentioned that I had an extra terminal? That terminal is made for the neck. Well, there are a couple of more details like the spikes, but the spikes I did not want to add them because, first, I did not want to alter my jacket. Second, it seemed that they could be damaged, so I did not install them at all. What I did was to buy a chain. This is the chain, a chain that weighs about 2 kilos. This is 2 kilos of chain. It serves two functions. One, complements the disguise, and two, it serves as reflective material. Traffic laws here state that the motorcyclist at night must carry something that is reflective, either the backpack or in the jacket. Now the chain serves as a natural reflective surface. And with the leftover chain, I did this. Now the costume was complete. Then I received the video. I hate when they send me those kinds of videos because they give me an idea. I mean, good ideas. I usually want to do them as well. I saw the video and it was great to do on my bike, but I did not want to burn up my battery. So I went downtown again and bought 3 more meters of LEDs. The tire setup was simply to create the system and tie it in a way that it would not come undone. How much was the cost of the costume? The mask cost me about €4. All the materials, papers and stuff like that cost around $4 US. The battery cost was around $13 US. The fanny pack and battery I already had. The belt I had, the jacket and the helmet I had. The LED tapes at around $13 US. The wiring and switches, another $10 US, and then obviously the consumption of electricity while connecting, and the soldering iron and the silicone gun. But the silicone gun consumes nothing. How do I put it on? How to use the disguise. The first thing is to protect the face from the mask while it is connected to the face. The neck. The jacket. The mask is connected to the helmet. There it is. Now I am ready to go out to the street. I feel like a Christmas tree. I reiterate, safety first. Comply with regulations. Yesterday was October 31st in Cali, Colombia, and after a certain number of situations that have arisen in the city, caravans of motorcycles have been creating disturbances, and the idea was to go out with my motorcycle. I wrote to the transit authority asking how it was not able to ride with the costume. They answered immediately, and they told me that the caravans were not going to be allowed, but in my case, if I complied with all traffic and safety rules, they do not see any reason why there was any kind of problem with my costume while riding my motorcycle. One can have fun, one can go out, one can enjoy what one is doing, but if one complies with all the rules and do not disturb others and be prudent, you should have no issues. When I made the costume, I really did not think much about it. It came out at the last minute. What I did enjoy was the most positive reaction from the people. I stopped, took pictures. I arrived at El Parque El Peñón, and the public shouted to me to come by, stop, take some photos. Once I stopped, all the people started to take pictures with me. It was a blast. More than the satisfaction of creating the disguise is the impact that it had generated and the good fun time that it gave all those people who took pictures. It generated a smile on many people's faces. There were many children who cried, scared, but it generated smiles and showed a lot of the people who had been impressed that people have taken a picture and enjoyed a good time. That is really what makes this all worth it. It was not what I invested in the disguise, but the reactions of those people. This is what makes it worthwhile to have done something like this. When I went through the streets, I liked how many people shouted and reacted by applauding, because the bike itself, with the motorcycle, the lights, and with the disguise, it was a great experience, and I had a great time doing it. Okay, time to go out again.